So like, how big is my head? Am I like, I think every time I do one of these, my head is like, I have the biggest head. And
I'll
so,
come in a little bit too, so we'll
all right,
equalize
we'll
the
try to
head
match it.
sizes.
All right.
I
Hey,
feel like
everybody.
that's
I'm
perfect.
Steven, and this is Anthony. And we've been trying to just to kind of fill everybody in a little bit on some of the background of the Make It Music project. It took us really, I think we kind of put it together. It didn't take that long. It took about a year to get almost everything together from the time we started. One of the things that I thought would be useful to talk about a little bit is the title, Make It Music. We just stumbled into it. It wasn't like some clever strategy. We were just brainstorming what is Dalcroze pedagogy? What are the steps? Is there a way to kind of codify it? And at some point we said, yeah, well, once you do that, then the thing to do is to make it into music. And so we wanted to talk about that just a little bit. The way I think of it is there are lots of things that sound like music, look like music, claim to be music, present as music, and yet don't in any way guarantee that the musical experience has been gained. I teach this concept all the time with my university students. We actually say, I'd like everybody in the room to just at a certain day and time that that we get this story out. I'd like everybody in the room to just recognize how easy it is to play the cello and feel nothing. You can like get your arm a bow in and have perfect intonation and wiggle your fingers very quickly, and yet the experience of being in the music isn't guaranteed. And so at high levels, deep musicianship is begging for that, is begging for the personal engagement. And at every level, whether you're working with beginner students or advanced students, we want to try to that what I really think the Dalcroze methods are so good at, so absolutely designed for, is to guarantee or demand some kind of personal involvement. So the way our project has kind of come together is we've got these 4 decks of cards. We've got the starters, we've got the Make It Music, we've got the challenge, and we've got the teaching artist. And the starters are intentionally not music. They're just stuff to do. It's just like, can you get anybody to do anything? And for years, that's how I've taught beginning Dalcroze pedagogy. It all just starts with, can you do a thing? What are your students willing to do, able to do? What's easy for them? And so, Anthony, when you're developing, you're iterating or coming up with new ideas, how are you grabbing those initial starters? Like, what is the
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I think that what makes the point so salient that you made is that first deck that we've got is, these are not things that are necessarily music and certainly not fully music. And taking those and then making those into a musical experience really is the essence of Dalcroze. And so for me, the start by doing something is just the way I've been doing it for a long time. I mean, we've spoken about this idea, this Rolodex of ideas that I've got, and I've got a million of those in my head. We're like, let's just start walking. Let's just start with doing some sort of gesture. Let's pretend we're different animals. We got to get some kind of energy going. Sometimes I say it's like putting clay on the wheel. Sometimes you just got to throw something down and big, ugly slab on the wheel before you're able to mold it into something. And so, you start with this just raw gesture, raw energy, whatever you've got. And then it's a beautiful, moment when that actually coalesces into a musical experience and you can feel it happen. And so I think, initially we just had called this project the Movement Deck. And the idea was that it was just these cards that were going to help us do movement. But as we started to figure out this 4-deck system, that is the thing that we kind of got hung up on, was that second card, that's the one that makes it music. And that, I believe, is the way we started using that word. Okay, well, it starts to make it music. How does it do that? And I just had a ring to it. And so we took it on as the title. So I think that process of starting with raw materials, making into a musical experience, and then finally creating or analyzing or experiencing or innovating at the end to really then, I think, kind of bring it in for a landing is just it's a process that, whether or not we had well defined it or that Dalcroze has well defined that process, I think it's, certainly in line with the tradition.
Yeah, what it took us 20 years or 30 years of attending every masterclass we could possibly find all around the world, to, you know, once you've spent enough time in the practice, you start to see, oh, I get it. There's a cycle here. There's sort of a plan, even though it's never really clearly defined. And I'm really proud of the fact that we've been able to boil something down into this. Obviously, this is not the full the everything
Right.
of Dalcroze pedagogy. It's not every nuance and every option, but it's a really great place to begin. If you're new to Dalcroze traditions, or if you are just looking for a more clear way to sort of go through a progression as you're building, I think this really is one of the classic recipes that we see from master teachers all over the world. Get everybody doing something. What are they willing to do? What are they able to do? We're not starting with fancy things. We're not teaching anybody anything, actually, in the first deck. The first deck, the whole point is, no, these are easy. This is low-hanging fruit, stuff they already know how to do, things that everybody's, you know, easy. No, there's no challenge, there's no stress, there's no threat. Let's just find something to engage. And then once we have the engagement going, now we can layer on what's a musical attention. And the second deck is all about, yeah, how quickly can we get to that music? Whether it's adding sound in the room, embracing the gesture, noticing the shared ensemble between others. I mean, there's all sorts of things that pop up in that deck that are the quick tie into, oh, I get it. That could be the experience of music. I can play notes on my cello and feel nothing, or I can play notes on my cello and notice the gesture, the lean, the shift of weight, the vibrance, the crescendo, the way that it actually makes me feel. And now all of a sudden, this bit of repertoire turns into something significant. And so that basic recipe, do a thing that's anything, could be absolutely anything. Let's make it music. And then the third deck is, now how do we sort of live in that space for a while? We can't just keep doing the same thing over and over. So let's find a variation. Let's extend it. Let's create with it. And so that third deck then is just challenging us to find a new variation on the original theme. And it's been fun.
Yeah.
I think it's good.
There's a temptation, I think, if you're playing the cello, to assume you're making music, right? There's a temptation, if you're playing a cello, you're like, oh, I'm making music, right? Like, and I love that in the Dalcroze work that you really don't have that temptation. Like, if you're moving, you don't necessarily feel like automatically you're making music. You have to really add that musicality in order to recognize it as music. Whereas playing the cello, it's very easy to get away with kind of not making music, but thinking you are. Does that make sense?
Yeah, well, with any of the instruments, and even with singing, you know, because there's sound in the room and it's in a certain order and it's in a meter and it follows patterns, there is a threshold. I'm sure somebody's going to argue with us about the way we're wording this, but there's a threshold where I know I'm doing the thing. The notes are being played, and yet what we're describing is not that there isn't sound in the room. Of course there's sound in the room, and if it's in tune, it's in tune, how good. But it's in what way am I invested in the sound? In what way is this sound squishing and stretching and pushing me to feel? And so when we're actually in the deep musical experience, as a 4-year-old or as a 70-year-old, you know, whatever the range is, when I'm actually in the experience, I feel myself moving. My inner musician me is expanding and contracting and opening and squishing, and it's that we're trying to get into. And so when we say, you're not actually playing music, playing the cello or the piano or singing or whatever, we're just meaning it's very possible to wiggle your fingers on a keyboard and yet not be personally invested in it. And so what the Dalcroze routines over and over and over require of everybody is that you become invested, because we're forcing the big body to be involved. Make it music.
Great.
That's the plan.
That's right. That's right. Hey, this is a really exciting, process of putting this book out. And so I hope people will check it out and leave us some feedback, leave some comments, subscribe to our YouTube page or Instagram, and stay in touch. Let us know how it's working for you and how you're finding it useful.
Thanks, everyone.